All right. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here at this Coven of Wisdom at Campus Herentals. I think these meetups are really important. I do a lot of them in Ghent, where I'm kind of from, because it's cool, right? You can geek about a lot of stuff, be about tech. I think these things are so important. I usually start this presentation with a bit of questions. I'm going to do that right now. Can I maybe ask which one of you has actually worked with HTML and CSS before? Can I see some hands? Right, almost all of you. I think, oh, all of you, wow, fantastic. I know there are people here interested in accessibility in a very experty level. I know there's one person. Any others? You'll be, after that talk from Tim, you will be. And last but not least, do we have any artificial intelligence engineers here? You have to ask it these days. No takers? Okay, that's good, because some people think my talk is about AI, which is artificial intelligence. It's just one letter difference. I will be talking about UI, user interface. So it's quite an important difference. So what about UI? I want to talk about the basics. Let's start with the basics. What are the basics of creating a good UI? And I'm not talking about basics that you see in every Smashing magazine article about where you have to put your menu to have the perfect thumb action. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what is a good UI for us as authors, as developers. And I narrowed it down to about 3 main pillars, which kind of overlap with user expectations as well, which is controllable, accessible, and stylable. I think those are the main pillars of creating a good UI. And there are a lot of common UI patterns out there. Let me try and keep this action up a bit. Raise your hands if you ever have to use one of these before. Yeah, of course, it's going to be everybody, right? These are our basic HTML form elements, and look at them. They're beautiful in their own very special way. And all of them are controllable. They are certainly accessible. Not each and every one of them is equally stylable, I'll give you that. But sometimes they're not enough. Sometimes you want to create a different kind of UI. Let's try one more. Raise your hands if you ever have to create one of these before. Yes, all right, a lot of hands, love it. This is a tooltip, right? We don't have an HTML element for that. That's quite sad. One more? Yeah, one more. How about this one? Cool little toast element popping up from the bottom. Yes, see one person raising a hand. Subscribe to our newsletter. Of course, you press yes. You love email. Yeah, awesome. That's the thing, right? And then the last one, I'm pretty sure it's going to be almost every one of you, but it's my personal favorite, so I had to include it, the combo box. I love the smell of combo box in the morning. I think they are fantastic, the most beautiful thing to style in the whole web. But what do you do when you can't create these kind of things? You have to search for some tools, some libraries. So you go out for your little tool hunt, library hunt, and you're looking at libraries in JavaScript thinking, hey, is this one accessible? Does it work with assistive technology? Does it work with keyboard navigation? You go to another one, and you're thinking, is this stylable? Can I fit the branding of my client inside of that UI? Very important question, especially for an agency. And last but not least, is it controllable or expandable? Of course, you want to control your UI, that's the basics, right? And you might want to have a library that uses that has more than one type of UI in it. A good example is Floater, for example, where you have a lot of different popovers and pop-ups, so you keep the library weight low for performance reasons. So it can be a bit frustrating. Finding that perfect UI tool can be frustrating, just as it is frustrating to find the perfect AI-generated image of an anime girl looking frustrated. Very frustrating. But these libraries are hurting our performance, right? Just adding library after library, it really hurts our performance, and accessibility kind of becomes an afterthought. We've all been there. Person X, or you maybe, created this beautiful, nice little combo box, and it looks beautiful, client's happy, you're happy, everybody's happy, and then at the end you do a little keyboard navigation test, and it is way off. What happens next? Ship it. True story. Happens all the time, and that's sad. And styling, of course, in a hacky way. We use a lot of important tags if you want to overrule the CSS of libraries. Luckily, we have cascadeers in CSS. It helps, but still, it gets messy really fast. But I am here to tell you that things are going to get better. And I think it's about time too. First, a little introduction of myself. My name is Brecht. Nice to meet you all. And I am a front-end developer / DevRel at I.O. Yes, your very own cool company. I work on a variety of projects, from car configurators to web shops, big and small content websites, really a lot of stuff. And besides my work at I.O., I am also a Google developer expert for web technologies, UI, and tooling. Why did I become a Google dev expert? Well, mostly because I write a lot. I write on a little blog called utilitybent.com, mostly about CSS stuff. I'm a bit of a CSS nut, really love CSS. But I also write a bit about UX and accessibility and things like that. And one thing kind of led to the other, and I started writing a bit for Smashing Magazine, CSS Tricks, and of course our I.O. Tech Hub. If you're into CSS and about CSS units, I just released an article today. Go check it out. It's awesome. On the Tech Hub, that is. So, enough about me, but first a little warning. I will be talking about some experimental features. For most of these features, you'll have to use Chrome Canary, go to Chrome tabs, to Chrome flags, and enable the experimental web platform features. That way you can play around with all the nifty new stuff that I'll be showing you later today. And this brings me to OpenUI. Has anyone ever heard of OpenUI before? Can I see some hands? One person? I saw you nodding. All right, cool. Right. So I've been part of OpenUI for about a year and a half or so. It's been a fantastic time there. It's a fantastic group. And OpenUI is a W3C community group, an open group. Anyone can join it. The reason I joined them was because of their mission statement. And they have a very strong mission statement that resonates with me as a CSS geek, which is they will allow web developers to style and extend built-in web UI controls. To style and extend web UI controls. Now that's interesting. One thing though, it is not about replacing current web UI. Because you can't do that, right? You cannot change the way current web UI works on web. You can break the web. You can break old stuff. It's not done. But we sure as hell can enhance it. So as I said, an open group. But what do we do exactly? I haven't really told that, right? Well, we do research. We do research about the different parts, states, and behaviors of current UI out there on the web. Sounds a bit boring, but it's actually quite interesting. Because we go through all these systems out there, all these libraries, and we kind of try to find the common ground in them. You might think, can't be that hard, right? You have a tooltip. What happens? Well, you have a button, you hover over it, shows a tooltip. Research done. Easy, right? What the hell are you going on about? But it's more than that. Think about how we take things for granted. Think about that tooltip on a touchscreen. What happens then? Is it a long press? If it is a long press, how long should I press it? Simple questions, but very important questions. So we write these explainers, and these explainers go to the HTML working group and the CSS working group, where they get turned into specs. And specs get implemented in browsers, and then, yeah, you can play with it. So some of these things can take some time. One thing, though, that we already have now is the Popover API. Anyone heard of the Popover API? Yes, the word is getting out. Great. Fantastic. This is it in action. Click a little button, it opens a popover in the center of my screen. How cool is that? What if I told you that this is just HTML? There is no JavaScript, there is no CSS going on here. This is pure HTML. Pretty cool, right? And this is the syntax. So we have a button in here which has a popover target that references an ID. The ID can be found on the sibling diff, you can see right there. And the button also has a popover target action, which has the value toggle in this case. This is also the default. Meaning, pretty simply, press the button, it will open, press the button again, it'll close. Now, the diff also has this new attribute called popover. And this kind of tells the browser, like, hey, don't show me right away, I need to be invoked by something. Fun thing, though, this is HTML, so you can style it, right? Perfectly. Cool, added animation there, but look what happens when I press the escape key now. It closes. Look what happens when I click next to it. It closes as well. So this has a light dismiss built in. This has some keyboard accessibility out of the box for free. You have this. I think that's awesome. But what if you don't want that? Maybe you don't want it. We got you covered. Same thing as before, but now I'm going to add the popover target action show, which is just going to show the popover when clicking the button. Now, the popover itself now has a value called manual, telling the browser that it shouldn't have a light dismiss, it should be explicitly dismissed. And of course, in that case, I added my own little button in there with the popover target action hide, referencing that same popover to close it. Example, you click on it, clicking next to it absolutely does nothing anymore. Pretty cool. So I've shown you the actions, which is toggle show and hide, and popover auto and manual are currently supported in Chrome, Edge, Safari, and Firefox nightly, but it is part of Interop 2024, which means it is coming in Firefox version 125, which is, if I'm not mistaken, 2 versions from now. So pretty close. We're getting there. If you do want to use it already, no worries, there is a polyfill by Oddbird. I will share my slides later on, so you can just go click that link and feel free to check it out. So I've shown you 2 popover states, which are the auto and manual, but we also have a third one we're working on, which is hint, that will force close other popover hints. Can be handy if you have multiple toggle tips or tooltips that closes just the other tooltips and nothing else. Work in progress. I'm not going to go too much into it because it doesn't even have an experimental implementation just yet. One thing, though, that is pretty cool is that you can use CSS to target the open state of a popover by using the state popover open in our CSS. So if you want to do some transitions or some animation or whatever you fancy, you can do that. Cool, right? And this, of course, for all you JavaScript people, of course, we have events and instances that you can use. Maybe you want to submit a form and show a popover. Maybe you want to use it as a, hey, your item was added to the basket. JavaScript. Awesome. One thing, though, and I really stress on this every time I do this talk, is that the popover is not a dialog. And that's a very important thing you should remember. It does not have the role, dialog, or modal attached to it. The popover is kind of meant to be used as an empty shell, so you have to provide your own area roles to it. If you want to have a dialog, well, guess what? There's an element for that, which is called the dialog element. If you want to know more about that specific, I want to refer to hidde.blog, which is the blog of Hidde. Fantastic speaker, also did a great CSS state talk, and also did a Coven of Wisdom in Eindhoven. Very good speaker, and yeah, he knows all about that stuff. It's also part of OpenUI. But we understand it. We understand the problem that people have and why they want to use this as a dialog, because the dialog element has some issues. You can open a dialog with HTML, but you can't use it as a modal unless you use JavaScript. Not perfect, right? So we are working on that by something called invoker buttons. And this is how that would work. Remember the syntax, pretty much the same as the popover, right? But now we're talking about an invoke target referencing an ID, which is the dialog element here. Now let me show you a little demo of what invokers can do by Luke Warlow, also part of OpenUI. So he clicks here and you open a date picker from a distance. You can also open a popover right there. You can also pop over a details element. You can open that one within Focus as well. How about a select, or even use video controls with just a button? Yeah, I see you looking there. That's awesome, right? I think that's awesome as well. So yeah, this is work in progress. It's currently supported in Chrome Canary if you want to play around with it. And for the video, a small example, this is kind of how it works, also referencing that ID, but also calling the invoke action in that case, for example, play. You kind of know these terms if you use JavaScript to do that. Those terms go in there, and ta-da, video plays, and does other stuff. Still some things we need to work out. For example, full screen, is it safe? Is it secure enough to do this? Still work in progress, but you kind of see what we're doing. And in the future, we're also working on hover and focus-based popover, which we don't have yet. Currently, the name is bike shed as interest, because how do you call something that is hovered and focused? We had long talks about it. Naming things is so hard. But yeah, for now, the name is interest target. So this might be something in the future. Not implemented yet, just giving it for you so you can think about that a little. Because people ask stupid questions, sometimes very hard, stupid questions, because, yeah, we can only do this on buttons, and then someone was asking, hey, maybe we should have hover popovers on anchors as well. Then I thought, sure, but why don't we do it at form elements as well? For like password, you want to type, you get a nice little strength meter in there. How cool would that to just do that with HTML? And it seemed like kind of opened Pandora's box when I asked that. So, work in progress. Well, cool thing though about popovers, and dialogues for that matter, is that they get added to the top layer. Who has heard of the top layer before? Right, not many. This is something cool. The top layer is a layer. Of course it is. Think about it as a layer in Photoshop or in Figma. And at the bottom, you have your DOM. Your DOM is in a layer. Now, above that, you add a new layer. This is the top layer, right? You're getting my drift? It is a layer that is outside of your document flow. It is outside of your DOM. And it is on top of everything else. And that makes perfect sense, because dialogues and popovers should be above anything else. Big benefit, though, no more z-index 9999. Not needed anymore. It's always on top. But what happens if you add two items in the top layer? Well, the last item added will be the one on top. That's the idea. Each element inside gets a backdrop pseudo element as well, which kind of makes it harder again for popovers, dialogues. They both get a backdrop. Oh no, that's kind of confusing. We know. But that's how it works for now. You can see it in your dev tools like this. When you open a popover, it kind of is like it's getting taken out of your DOM. You still see it in your DevTools in your DOM, but it gets taken out of your DOM and it gets thrown into that top layer. Just bam, goes in there. And then you can see that in your DevTools, seeing that there's one item in the top layer at the top right-hand side. And at the bottom, you can actually see which items are in there and click reveal, and it will show them where they were originated in your DOM. That's how that works. And you also see the little backdrop pseudo element as well. But there's a problem, because when you add items inside of your DOM and take them away out of your top layer, how do you animate these things? React people know this problem. On transition end, ring a bell for some people. It gets taken out, so you have no time to animate it. Well, luckily there is a part implementation, which is add starting style, which can actually declare, you can declare a starting style for your items, and that way you can animate to them. Also, by allowing discrete properties, which you can see here, you can these days transition to display none. So, important one for that. Starting style is currently available in Chrome and Edge. I'm not sure if it's an interop. I kind of forgot to check. Should have checked that. But yeah, we'll have to see. And maybe you want to create something like this, because this is a perfect case for popovers, right? Cool little popover coming up here, little tool, toggle tip action. But there's kind of a problem. I kind of told you already. My popover is out of my DOM. It's taken out, it's thrown into that top layer. So how am I going to position this? It has no position relative absolute to begin with. Where can I place this? It's out of my DOM. It's somewhere gone. Luckily, the CSS working group is working on something called the CSS anchoring API. And this is kind of how it doesn't work. As I said before, you cannot just add a wrapper around your button and your popover and work with position relative and then absolute position your popover. Won't work. It's not going to happen. So I created this little popover example. This is the HTML. Nothing new here. Kind of the same thing I've shown you in the beginning, right? Cool referencing the ID. Gave it the role node. If you wonder why the role node, ask Scott O'Hara. He told me it was a node. Guy knows much more about accessibility, so I said, okay. So this is how the anchoring API currently works. This is experimental stuff, okay? So you have an anchor name property that you can add to your button. Give it a name, toggle tip, you can call it whatever you want. Then your popover, you're going to absolute position, and you're going to use the new anchor function to place the bottom to the toggle tip item's top, right? And the left to the center. That way, you can anchor items that are not in the same flow container of position relative. And then you think you kind of found the perfect solution, then this happens. Now, why is that? Both of them have the same name, so it's kind of just going to the last item inside of my DOM. So that's not really useful, right? So I played around with it a bit more, and of course there's a way to handle multiple toggle tips by using CSS custom properties. Adding an inline style, declaring a CSS variable, saying, hey, button anchor, that's the name I gave it, is toggle tip 1, and this is going to be my anchor name. I'm going to do the same thing for the popover itself, giving it the same name. The second toggle tip you see at the bottom, practically the same thing, except this time I'm giving it the name toggle tip 2 instead of toggle tip 1. And then I go back to my CSS, and instead of actually just reading that anchor name, I'm going to use that custom property, and I'm going to read that variable in there. Same thing for my position. I'm going to use the variable, so this will be a unique name. And that way, you can actually handle a multiple toggle tip system with just HTML and CSS. I think that's pretty cool. But let's go a bit further, right? It's not enough. Let's go further. I like to go crazy with the stuff. So maybe you're scrolling a bit, and it's not the perfect UX, right? I'm scrolling this page, you kind of want the thing to come to the bottom, right? That would be good UX if the toggle tip would be at the bottom. So, yeah, how do we fix that? Well, another experimental feature is position fallback. And at the left-hand side, you see me doing the same thing again, using that custom property anchor name. And I'm going to use a new property here called anchor default, referencing that same custom property as before. But now I'm going to declare a position fallback, and this once again has a name, fallback in this case, because, yeah, just give it a name. And then I'm going to say to CSS, hey, try to place that bottom based on my anchor default's top. If that doesn't work, try to place the top of my popover to my anchor's bottom. It's kind of like a try and catch, except in CSS, it's try, 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 try. And then all the stars will align. If you create something like this, all your problems will be solved. Then you can go around, scroll on your page, you go to the bottom, you click the thing, and then you notice that you almost got it. Because your little arrow is still pointing at the wrong direction. So, how could I fix this? Anyone has an idea? No? Me neither. I don't know. I absolutely don't know. As I said, this is all future stuff. And I'm hoping that the CSS working group is working hard on this in 2024. It's one of the things I'm looking forward to most. So yeah, let's hope they find an idea. Because there's even a completely different anchoring syntax out there. They really have a lot of work to do to get this thing done. All these anchoring examples, by the way, you can play around with them. They're on my last slide, links to it in Chrome Canary for now. There was a lot, right? Anchoring API, popovers. Let's do something a bit more easy now. Let me talk about exclusive accordions. Has anyone heard of these before? No? These are live, though. Imagine you want to create something like this. Cool little accordion. Look at this, keyboard navigation coming up. Awesome. Pretty cool. Now we already have an element that kind of does that, right? We have the details element in HTML. Now, with OpenUI, we wrote an explainer, and this is the solution. By giving a name to each details element, we kind of group them, just as you would group the radio buttons, right? This is familiar, right? We know this stuff. So, with that, we can actually create an accordion with just HTML. And the best part is, this is currently available in Safari, Edge, and Chrome. Firefox pending. Now, I'm going to give you one more thing about OpenUI, which is the stylable select. And this was kind of the hardest thing for me to talk to you about today, because I'm not exaggerating if we are changing direction in this exactly a week ago. I think the meeting is now a half hour busy. Exactly a week ago, we chose to change directions. But I wanted to show you some of the capabilities we're working on anyway. So maybe you want to create something like this, right? Cool, beautiful little select. Or my personal favorite, the combo box. There he is again in all his glory. Maybe you want to create this. So you can't do that right now. You can't use this with the basic select because, yeah, you can't style that list box. It's not possible. Perfectly controllable and accessible element, but unfortunately, not very stylable. How about this? What if, and this is the latest spec I'm telling you right now, what if we could add a data list inside of a select? And that data list could function as the list box. Just an idea. Because this is how a select is built, and this is a quite important one to know. We have a select wrapper, and inside of that we have a button. A button can contain your selected value, right? And your little marker, that little arrow thingy you see. As a sibling to that, you have your list box, the nice little box in there with optional option groups and options inside of it. So what if you would take control of the markup and we would do something like this? What if we would have a select in there? Maybe we'll have to give it an attribute. That's one of the things we're still discussing. That's why question marks and things like that. And inside of that, we have a button. And inside of that, we have a new element called the selected option that will show your selected option. Using the data list, and we can add some divs in there and some options so we can get full control of the styling. But if we could do something like this, well, then we could just use CSS to style it, right? Just some basic CSS going on here, nothing really fancy. And with the current implementation, kind of looks like this. I created something like this. Just HTML and CSS. Pretty cool. And also, just have to show it, keyboard navigation. Awesome, for free. But, as I said, for now, in Chrome Canary, it's still an older version. If you would look at my slides, I am updating those frequently. So if the new spec kind of gets released, experimental browser feature, I will add that as well. So, basic markup. As I've shown you before, I left the attribute here, but that's not sure as well. If we could do something like this, why not do something like this? Why can't I add a little input in there, an input type search? And if you would combine all of these things together and add a bit of smart JavaScript in there to really enhance your accessibility and some search behavior, you could create your combo box by only providing mostly the search behavior and a little bit of ARIA live stuff in there. And you can do this with just HTML and CSS, perfectly styled. So for me, this took about 50 lines of JavaScript. No libraries. I'm sure some of you who are a bit more JavaScript savvy can do it in 40. I did it in 50. But that's pretty cool. But we are also working on a standard combo box research. So maybe this won't be needed as well. We'll see. Research has started. But even if you're not going to use it for a combo box, well, let me show you some of the creative possibilities that I created with them. For example, how about this one? Big fan of Witcher games. How about a little potion selector? Just HTML, CSS, no JavaScript going on in there. How cool is that? Have nice little keyboard navigation, all for free. Fantastic, love this. But how about this one? I had fun with this one as well. If you notice good, you see a nice little sticky element that is floating what you're selecting. Just with HTML and CSS. It's fantastic. It's currently available in Chrome Canary. You can check these demos out there. But remember that all of this is still a work in progress, unfortunately. But you can get involved with OpenUI. If you want to learn a bit more, if you want to check out our GitHub, comment on some issues, please do. We need people creating demos of this stuff as well. Please do. If you don't want to get involved, send them to me and I'll send them to them. Really, just get involved because it's so important. This is shaping the future of UI. Because the future of UI, it's pretty controllable, right? I've shown you that. We have nice default HTML elements that we can control. We know the stuff, we've done this before. The future of UI is also accessible, giving us some keyboard navigation straight out of the box. Very handy. But most importantly, for me, as a bit of a CSS geek, the future of UI is stylable, giving me the chance to really dig in with CSS and create some creative stuff. The future of UI is open. Thank you. Any questions? Yes?
About the tooltip one?
Yeah.
It seems like very overcomplicated if you can do the same with JavaScript and maybe less lines.
Yes, I love that question. Right, so let's talk JavaScript for a second here. The problem with JavaScript usually is, even if not using libraries, you're usually manipulating your DOM, right? You're adding some inline styles in there constantly to show and hide that tooltip. If you are just adding a custom property, that you're not changing your DOM the whole time, which makes it much more performant. So that's the benefit of it. When we're talking about ease, that's personal, I think. I think this, for me, this is easier, but that's for me. But this is way more performant, that's for sure. I'm not going to talk about ease because, yeah, I mean, that's subjective, right? A lot of people rather write a lot of JavaScript and are more proficient. For me, this just feels natural to do it that way. But yeah, but good question. Anyone else? Yes?
Yeah, with the tooltip again, could you use anchor attribute with an ID to position?
There's also one of the possibilities that they're working on in this case. But still, the reason why I've shown you this way was partly to show the problems we still have with the little arrow, because that will certainly be a problem with the attribute as well. But yeah, there's also the anchor attribute, which can, for basic cases, would be sufficient, certainly, yes. Anything else? All right, thank you.